Good morning, and thank you for joining Resilient You with Alicia Pozsony. Each week, we bring guests on the show to talk about their experiences, and this week we have Dr. Yvonne Kaye. Yvonne is a mental health and addiction specialist, also specializing in loss and grief. She was a radio host for 18 years, and I'm so excited, Yvonne, to have you on the show.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
I love your accent as well. I love it.
Yes, I'm a Londoner. Actually, I'm half English, half Irish, but I was raised in London.
Okay, wonderful. I've never been, although I'm turning 50 this year, and it's my goal. I want to go.
You must go.
Yes,
You must
across
go.
the pond. I want to go, and there's so many things to see and do and to experience it.
Absolutely.
I took a DNA test, and I thought I was Irish, Italian, and German. Come to find out, I have English somewhere.
See?
So
that's a message. You have to go back there and go to London, and other parts are beautiful.
Exactly.
Other parts of the country.
Yes. So Yvonne, I was doing my research, and I noticed that you went through war as a child.
Yes.
Can we hear a little bit about your experience and how that impacted you in your life?
Yes, you certainly can. And it certainly did impact my life to this day. What I learned as a child in war, I carry with me today, and it's really affected my choice of profession. For example, grief. I mean, we were bombed out twice, and the people who took us in, who had little more than we did, I remember when I was 8, looking at those people and saying, I want to be like that when I grow up. And I am. My choice of professions are all based in the war. So I was 6 years old when, just before my 6th birthday, when war was declared. And we were all away, and then my whole family left me there without a word, not telling me why. So I was there for 6 months and finally went back. And then the government decided that they needed to evacuate the children. And interestingly, they have since apologized to all of us that was the worst thing they could have done, to send us away from the family. So I was taken to a place called Highbridge in Somerset, and I was there for a short while until I was 8. I made myself appear to be ill, so they sent me back to London. So I was there in the worst of the Blitz, but that's where I wanted to be. And what really worries me is I'm seeing today history repeating itself. And then I look at the Ukraine, and that's what I went through. But thanks to Churchill, we were not invaded. We were bombed from another country outside, but not inside. If Hitler had crossed the English Channel, I wouldn't be here talking with you. And he decided to go after the Russians, so we were very fortunate that he didn't come in, but it was close. And I speak for children a lot because people think that children don't understand, and they do. They do. You know, my family was involved in rescues from the concentration camp. So I had a foster brother, George, who was rescued and came on the kinder transport, which was rescue children on trains. We adopted him. But they would talk about what happened in the camps. And I was a little girl, but I heard every word, and I understood it. So I tell people today, children understand. They don't think they don't get it, because they do. And it's really, really important that you're honest with them. I mean, I come from a family of secrets, so nobody would tell me anything about anything. So I heard it all. But the war, I still have PTSD, not as bad as I do have it, but that's another choice, you see. I have PTSD, so I work with veterans. And 14 members of my family went into combat. And one was taken prisoner by the Japanese. And so I have all this background, and I hate war, but I will stand by the veterans. I will stand by the military, because it's not their fault. They do as they're told. And we just had this thing in Congress and the Senate where they weren't going to pass a health law. And I was listening to the people who said, they raised all this money to send us to war, but then they couldn't find any money to treat us when we were injured. So I work with veterans, and I'm very honored to do so. My grief work, that's my passion. I work with all kinds of grief, but my specialty is working with families who've lost a child to death. And more specifically, the parents of murdered children. That's where my heart is. And I have so much respect for those people. I can't even put it into words, how much respect I have for them. And I'm in touch with a lot of them that aren't in treatment or anything anymore. I'm a consultant for the Compassionate Friends, which is an incredible organization for families who've lost a child in any way to death. So I'm very, very involved with that. So having my war experience and being involved with families who've lost children, I can't even explain how I was feeling with Uvalde when they came in with the AK-15s and killed those little ones. And then in Buffalo, in New York, and all the others that went before. So I'm a strong advocate about AK-15s, that they belong in the military and nowhere else. So, my life is multifaceted. I'm all over the place.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that you're able to take your experiences and apply them to help others. I mean, that's something that I've always had a calling for myself. I wasn't a victim of a war.
Thank goodness.
In the traditional terms, but I had a war going on inside my house and in my life growing up. And so the trauma, was there. The lack of support, the lack of structure. My mother would at any moment, when you're talking about that being uprooted and not knowing anything and just being there, in my experience, I want to share that I had that. My mother, I would come home from school and my mother would say, let's go. Everything would be gone from the house. We would up and go, and it would be to a shelter or to another house or to stay with a friend. And, I remember at the age of 4 sleeping in a hallway with a light, like a fluorescent light above my head that would never shut off. I was in a crib that was too small for me, and it was urine soaked because of all the other kids who had been in it. And I remember saying to my mom, I want to go home. And she said, I'm doing what I can, you'll be okay. Just go to sleep. And we didn't have food. And I can't even tell you the conditions, but you talk about the concentration camps, being exposed to, such an extreme environment and PTSD. And, Yvonne, I just want to thank you again for being on my show. I love hearing the stories. And, I think that Resilient You, my show, is also there as a calling. And I'm so happy to be able to feature guests such as yourself, right? And we can help others.
Yes.
So when you were younger and you said that you were claiming to be sick because you wanted to be returned back to London, that sounds to me like a coping strategy.
Oh, yes.
That
Very
was
much
kind of
so.
innate to you, right? Because at that age, you had to have, very, very smart of you, but that's
Hmm.
interesting. I
Yeah.
imagine, and we're all born with coping techniques, right? So it's important to understand them and look back. And so, how do you feel about that? Looking back, you said it was where you needed to be. Um, the bond with family, was that the thing that drew you back?
You mean when I created this environment to get what I wanted? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
Well, it was based on a lot of things. The people who I was a foster child to, the man, elderly, and he was very kind. He was like a grandfather. But his wife and his daughter were not. And so I had a doll. Her name was Queenie. And I was allowed to hold her for half an hour every Sunday. And if I did something they didn't like, then I wasn't allowed. So I used to listen. They used to listen to the news. And when I heard that London was bombed, I was terrified and I would cry. So I was punished for that. And I wasn't allowed Queenie. And she was my only comfort. So that had a lot to do with me making a decision as a very little girl that I was not going to put up with it anymore. And what the war gave me, some of the gifts it gave me, not that I recommend war to do this, but one of the gifts it gave me was what I call a watch me personality. From a young child, you tell me I can't do something and watch me. And I'm just like that today. I am, to all intents and purposes, elderly. To some people, old. But I'm not aging, I'm ripening. So I don't, and I talk. My son works in a retirement community, and he has me come and talk sometimes. And I say, you don't listen to people who tell you what you can and can't do and what you shouldn't do or should do at your age. If you've got your wits about you and you're healthy, then, people say to me, are you still driving? Really? Yes. So the war gave me things of humor. Also, believe it or not, funny things happen. I have to tell you a story about my aunt, because in those days, there were a lot of GIs there, American troops, and they used to hang around Piccadilly Circus. And they were very kind to us, little children. They would give us sweets and whatever. That saying, "You got any gum, chum," came from us, little children. And my aunt, my favorite aunt, used to date some of them. So one evening, this man took her to the restaurant, and she was wearing a very nice tailored pantsuit. So you go in, and the maitre d' says to her, "I'm sorry, we don't allow women in that wear pants." And she said, "Why? If the man comes in and he doesn't have a tie, you give him a tie. Do you have a skirt for me?" No. So she went and told the man she was with, and they talked about it. And she went back the next time. She went back 3 times altogether to this maitre d'. And he said, "I told you, we do not allow women in with pants." So she dropped them. Right there. She undid them, and they fell down. And she said, "I'm not wearing them." You've never seen she told me, you've never seen a person get a table so fast. So I say to the women, you can thank my aunt that you can wear slacks and you can wear pantsuits now. Because she spoke for you.
Oh, wonderful,
She was
wonderful.
hilarious. And that's another thing that's important in my work. I use humor a lot. never laughing at, always laughing with. I work with cancer patients, and I have a thing with them. It's called laughing when nothing seems funny and when it is. So
Now that's interesting. Do you have any examples of that? How you
of
would
humor.
humor with the cancer patients when
Oh,
nothing seems funny? That's something that I have not. Thank
yeah.
God, I guess I haven't yet had that. Uh,
Well, it's amazing. I've learned that whether I'm with cancer patients or if I'm volunteering in a prison or um, whatever, in grief also, if I create an environment where people feel safe, they're going to say and tell you stories they wouldn't elsewhere. And I say this because people say really stupid things. Now, stupid is my worst curse word.
mm,
So when I say something stupid, I'm being very, very rude.
mm,
And things like if there's a cancer patient and they're with friends or family or whatever, and they laugh, immediately they say, "Oh, you're over it. That's good."
mm,
They say it to bereaved parents. Bereaved parents have such guilt when they laugh.
mm,
So it's up to me and people like me to
mm,
create that environment that they can say anything they like, including language. Some of the stories of most cancer patients, I mean, it's hysterical. They are absolutely hilarious. They
mm,
they tell me chemo jokes. Can you believe it? My
mm, mm,
second husband, my John, he died 7 years ago. He had three cancers, and I was his care sharer. That's the word I've created because
mm.
it's not a one-way thing. For almost 10 years. And he was one of the funniest people that I've known. And these men and women would say things about the position they were in and what we would think of as something so undignified, and they thought hilarious.
Mhm.
And coming from the people who lived through that makes it authentic.
Yeah,
And
that's amazing.
yeah, they tell me, for example, now this is what happens. I'm sure you know this. I feel as if I'm preaching to the choir here. But when someone is diagnosed with cancer, everybody they know tell them what to do. You've got to go to
Yes.
this doctor. You have to go to this hospital. So they would bring that up in our group, how
Mm.
infuriating that was. And so one week, this woman was so infuriated by her sister, who kept on about this should. Another word I don't like. Should. And until the woman was just almost homicidal. So she's talking about this, and I said to her, "Why don't you shrink her?" And she said, "What?" I said, "Shrink her. Imagine when she's on to you that she's going smaller, and her voice is getting smaller, and then shove her in your pocket." So she's doing this, and she's shrinking her sister. And then she throws her on the floor and stomps all around the floor. So people
Oh,
were falling off their chairs.
yeah. Yeah.
And
How
and it worked
wonderful.
for her because people don't understand that when you confuse people who are already in a state of almost horror about a
Mm.
diagnosis, you're only making matters worse. They
Yeah,
do
that's
not
true.
want
That's true.
unwarranted advice.
Mm-mm. That's true. That's true. And I imagine when you said that, you create an environment where people can feel safe and, to use humor to diffuse all those intense emotions and feelings that can really have an impact, a greater negative impact on them. That's a wonderful, wonderful sentiment, and I hope all our listeners are can take that to heart. Even if they're not facing something as detrimental as that. That's a good. I love that, Yvonne. If someone is talking to you and belittling you or making you feel less than you should, and you know it isn't right in your heart and mind, try it. Try that as a technique. You can shrink them, and then you
Yeah.
can even stomp on them or put them in your pocket. I love it. I love it.
We were always waiting for her to show up to hear what had happened, because it was so funny.
Yes,
And
yes.
the other thing is I work, or I have worked with women my entire life. But one of the things that I've done is to work on self-worth and self-esteem, and to know that there are times when they need to speak their truth. For example, I talked about unwanted advice. That is a nightmare for people who are grieving, and cancer patients or anybody that has a serious condition. They don't want to hear that.
Hmm.
They want to be with people that they can express themselves without being judged.
Hmm.
And so I work with self-esteem, and they say to me, they're always giving me advice. And I said, well, could you just smile and say, I don't remember asking for your opinion? And they love that. And they're afraid to do it. But once they do it, they're not being rude. I think people are being offensive when they infiltrate people's grief or fear, whatever it is.
Mm. Yeah, it's true. And sometimes, those close to us, whether it's our family or our friends, they're the ones who think they can say anything, or they think they have more of a right to give them instruction or help, and I'm guilty of this because I have always been a helper. I've always tried to be that mother figure, and I don't know why, but it is off-putting to people. I mean, even in daily life. And so right now I'm on my own journey trying to figure that one out. But it's it's a journey, and as you're talking about your experiences and the different people and situations that you work with, I mean, it's such an inspiration, knowing that you've had experiences of your own, and then you've gone through it, and now you're able to give back. And so I've heard you mention people for with grief, and you've mentioned cancer patients. You've worked in prisons. Um, and it's just so amazing. I hope our listeners, no matter what you're going through now or what you've been through, if you're brave enough to face it, there's people like Yvonne out there who can help. Yvonne she's well respected by mental health professionals and addiction professionals. Um, and again, I'm sure being a radio host for 18 years in Philadelphia, that was also, very educational, right? Because you're able to have all those experts and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
experience that you carry with you. Um, and also, Yvonne, I know you have a podcast. I want to take this moment just to mention you have a podcast, and I saw you
Yes.
had 3 seasons of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's called "How the Hell Did I Get Here from There?" Did I get that right?
They wanted to call it the Dr. Yvonne Kaye Show, and I said, absolutely not. I only have people as guests who are willing to talk about openly whatever,
Mm,
not be afraid. And they've been incredible. But the most important thing is they can be found. Sometimes when you get very well-known people on and they give a marvelous message, but they can't get in touch with them. So
yeah.
every guest I've had, they give out their information, and they can call them, they can email them, whatever. And I think
Mm,
that's important. There's one point I need to make that I think is really, really important when I'm interviewed. And people get the idea that I'm fine. That's my
mm,
worst F word, four-letter F word, fine.
oh,
And they need to know that I have days. I have days. I'm on a roller coaster. I'm in grief also. So it's a roller coaster. Edie talks about this. She says when you're in a fairground, you know when you're going to get on the roller coaster, and you're going to get up and down and up and down. Emotionally, you don't. You don't know when you're going to get on. You don't know when it's going to be up. You don't know when it's going to be down. And so when people hear me speak, I feel it's very important for them to know my roller coaster goes down sometimes. There are times I really would rather not get up in the morning. And what I teach is if you wake up and you feel you have a lousy day, then have a lousy day. Because if you fight it, you're going to internalize it and it's going to last. But if you allow yourself, if possible, to pamper yourself for a day and do nothing if you can possibly do that, or read or listen to music or whatever, it's powerful. Otherwise, it just continues. I usually find the next day I'm back to whatever. But if I don't allow myself all my emotions, I'm in trouble. And I know a lot of people, I'm a Brit. And what do we say? Keep smiling, keep your chin up, The stiff upper lip is what we're known for. And I found myself doing that, smiling when I was feeling horrendous. And that didn't help anybody. So I ask people what helps them. Laughter helps them. Music, without doubt, helps them. And when I work with the community at Living Room, which is a drug and alcohol rehab, I play a lot of music. I love all kinds of music. Some I don't quite understand. But at heart, I'm a rocker. And I have them listen to the lyrics of some of those songs from Bowie and Phil Collins. They're astonishing. And they respond to that.
Wonderful. Yeah. So when you are working with drug and addiction and the rehab, that's another subspecialty. And I'm just so amazed. I actually I put out a book, Yvonne. I have to mention it. I mention it on every one of my shows. So, Emotional Strength Explained is a self-help workbook that I had put out. It has prompts inside where people can quickly get to the root of whatever it is that they're facing and have a place to focus and know their next steps, what they need to do to improve their situation. And when you talked about, using music, that's something that that resonates with me because I've always loved music, and a lot of my friends and relationships, even the one with my husband, he's a musician, and so we ended up, using that as a bond. But one thing, when we empower ourselves with self-care, using things like music, for example, it's interesting because I guess where I'm going with this, and I know I'm all over the place in this moment, but it's like the synapses are firing in my brain, So for my book, I'm working on other series, doing some for kids, different age groups. I'm also doing for relationships, people in bad relationships, also drug and alcohol, people supporting those with addiction, right? And so it's very interesting to me to hear this, that you can use tools like music to really help empower ourselves, to get through it, right? To help ourselves, and we can even begin healing, right? Are there any...
Hold that book up again. Hold the book up.
It's here behind me on the wall, too.
So it is. I want to buy one of those. You'll have to tell me where I can get it.
Thank you. Well, it is available on Amazon.
Oh, okay. I can get it.
Yep, and it's also on my website, aliciapozsony.com. And, thank you so much. I've had counselors say that this has helped people with needing, getting to it a little bit quicker, helping their clients, because it's, but it's good for beginners. It's good for people who are just starting out on their journey. And it's not a 300-page book, so it's a nice tool.
Yes,
But again, I'm so excited about what is up and coming. So again, if you don't mind, I might hit you up, Yvonne, when I get to that. Uh,
absolutely.
those subspecialties, because you know grief, for example. My cousin passed away, um, and today is his birthday, and as we're getting closer, I'm thinking of him and thinking of all the things. We both share August as our birthday month, and I realized how much he was in my life during the month of August, right? Because of both of our birthdays, and just we would
Oh,
talk
right.
about life, and we really had a connection that I really don't have with anyone else.
Mm,
And so, and I remember as a child, when at one point we lived in an apartment that was across from a cemetery, and I would look at the cemetery and I would wonder, what is it like to lose someone, to go to a funeral? Like, I didn't have that. So I always thought I might go walk over there and go to someone's funeral to see what it
yeah,
was like.
sure.
Um, my mother, she wasn't fond of that, so I never did it. I was a respectful child. So
I used to go and sit in the cemetery and read because it was so quiet and nobody could talk to me.
yes,
And you and
yes.
I have something in common,
Uh-uh.
a grasshopper brain. I have
Oh,
a grasshopper brain. I am boom, 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 all over the place.
oh, I
So I
love it.
appreciate that with you.
Wonderful. You can follow along, then great. More. I'm so well. That's interesting. So, do you think that's a female thing, that we can think about multiple things and go down different paths quickly, or?
It depends on, I can't just say men and women because my sons, for example, can do
Mm,
all that stuff. And
wonderful.
male friends, and my husband, John, was like that. And then there are some that have had it drummed into them what it has to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Mm.
don't get into that. I mean, it's not their fault. That's the way they've been raised, to be manly, whatever that is.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm very, I'm interested in working with men, but I prefer them to be with a man, with a male counselor. And then I
Mm-hmm.
prefer women to be with a woman. When I used to do groups, I always used to have a man come in and run the men's group, not me,
Mm. Mm.
because they look at life differently. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
sound sexist, but they do. What's been drummed into them as children, that certainly little boys don't cry. That's the bigger
Mm.
thing. Do not cry. And you've always got your fists.
Yeah.
Take care of business with your fists. So they've been raised in that thought process. Whereas girls are said, they can cry and whatever. I don't like any of that stuff. I really
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. And today, it's so different, right? Like, I remember, because I have a boy and a girl, and in my own experience, I remember my son. There was a little girl who was saying, "You can't come up here on this playground," and he said, "I can come up. We all can use this playground," and he made his way through. Well, she hit him, and then he hit her back. He was 5. And of course, he got, uh, you know, at school they had a no bullying policy, so they said you can't do that, and he got a consequence for that.
Mhm.
Well, from that point on, I realized my son appreciated equality, and he never, would hit a girl. But then he had a little sister, and his little sister is, I won't say scrappy, but she stands up for herself. So when they were starting, he was 10 and she was 5 and they were at it, I look over and they're wrestling together on the ground. Like, she was standing up for herself. And he was like, "You don't want me to use my full force on you, right, Emily?" And so she's, "Just try me," she says, and you
There
could
you
just
go.
imagine this girl. So she wore dresses and bows in her hair until she was about 5. And at that point, she changed. and then he changed. And so, it's just an interesting dynamic to see the experiences that they go
Right,
through,
of course.
and different and each person that I work with, because I work with youths also who are, in different situations, whether they have their families or they don't. And, I myself, we have another thing in common. I was a foster child as well. And, it's interesting because I think all of our experiences make us and turn us into who we are. And today it's wonderful to see that the world is changing yet again quickly. That people can really be themselves, and that's something,
Yes.
as you know counselors or specialists in these areas of trauma. I think that we have to look at things with a different lens, right? Like, we can't just say, okay, uh, you're a male and you don't cry or you don't feel your
Right.
feelings. A lot of I, it's still there though, right? So that generational thing is coming down, and it's hard. I think a lot of times for people to feel their feelings and deal with what they have and grow. But um,
Yes, you're so right. I'm a feminist and have been for years, and so are my sons.
mm,
They definitely are into. I mean, they were horrified when this was handed down from the Supreme Court, and my two
mm,
daughters, of course. But I really respect the way that they will speak up for women, and their
mm,
wives are very grateful to me because of the way that they are. But the other
mm,
thing, working with the recovering community, I'm in recovery myself. I have 51 years without a drink. And
wow.
that helps. And the other thing that helps is,
Mm,
as I say, there's always humor in everything.
mm,
When I go there and they look, when I first walk in and they don't know me, you can see in their faces, these young people, are, what's this old woman going to tell us? Really? So I go, oh, and I let them see all my tattoos. And once they see my tattoos, I've got them right where I want them.
well, wonderful.
This
So,
is my
yeah.
this is my husband's memorial arm. This is the Royal
Mm,
Navy and
okay.
messages, all the things he believed in. So he was
Oh,
cremated, so I carry with him with me on my arm. But it helps me in these situations, where people don't know me and they think, I don't know about her. Well, it's
yeah.
wonders. It
The
was worth it.
connection, right, right. So if you're listening right now and you want to find a way to connect with someone in your life, just as Yvonne has shared an example of how to connect despite the difference in age, there are ways. You have to be able to, be open in your mind to
Oh, yeah.
those things, right? So
Yes.
relationships, for example, if people are not connecting, there's ways you can connect. If you've ever once connected, you can go back to those ways, right? If you used to do something and you don't do that anymore, go back, go bowling, or take that time to reconnect and rekindle. And if there's a connection with a sibling or a parent or someone else in your life, if you have you know that thing that's keeping you apart, consider what you might do to connect, because life is short. And for me, we all have our core beliefs, and sometimes they're very different from those of another, but we're all here and we're all human. And I think that you know life is too short to have negativity, to have trouble. If we look at others, we can learn from them, and that's
Hmm.
that's something wonderful. um Humor, I've always been witty, right? Like, in those moments of tension, I'll come out with this witty comment, and it just kind of lightens things. It has been helpful. um
Yeah.
but again, I love what you said about ripening with age. It's true. Like, we don't have to be set to other people's expectations. We can you know be ourselves and still get through things. We can use humor. um Yvonne has shared that we can have passion about life and work on our self-worth, our self-esteem. Um, it's important to speak our truth. If you feel bad and you're having a lousy day, don't fight it. Take the time and empower yourself with some self-care. Um,
There's
Laughter helps.
something else I'm working on now,
Hmm.
and I'm quite an authority on it, on narcissism.
Mm.
I was married to my first husband for 25 years, and he was a narcissist. And
Mm.
not as bad as some that we see these days, politically. But I remember coming to this country because I was a codependent. I didn't think. I just did as I went, and it was a horror story for me for what happened. I won't go into it. But I feel that people need to understand narcissism because they really don't. And not only women, men put up with narcissistic relationships. So I like to explain what they are. Like a narcissist is never wrong. They'll twist your words, and even if they have been the offensive one, you will end up apologizing to them. And then you might get this minute or two of being very, very self-aware, and then back right down again. So I want to do a series of short videos on narcissism, because I really want people to understand and how they can deal with it and how they can remove themselves from it. When I got divorced, that's when my life began. And I tell people there is no shame in recognizing what it is and understanding that you can actually do something about it, because it is rampant. Just recently, you talked about your cousin. My cousin Linda died, and her mother, my Aunt Frida, was without doubt the most unpleasant, vicious woman I've ever known. She was hateful.
We all know someone like that.
Hateful. And she had two children. She had Linda and she had her son. The son was the prince.
Mm-hmm.
She tortured that woman for her whole life. And my cousin Karen, my favorite cousin, we would always be there for Linda. And she and I, Karen and I, took on my aunt. So she learned not to mess with us. That woman lived to 106.
What?
And tormented her. And so when she died, the whole family is thinking, oh, now Linda can have a life. Right?
Wow.
1 year she developed the most vicious cancer. Untreatable. Having gone through all those years with this narcissistic woman who I can't even explain, she was that bad. She almost killed me once. My grandmother was living, well, she was dying with us. And I was 12 and I was sitting on the bed holding her hand. And my aunt had a row with somebody. And she went out, she threw a brick through the window. Now her mother's lying there dying. And it just missed me. Just missed me. And she was just, well, you can't cure a narcissist. It's almost impossible. But that with Linda's death, which was only a couple of months ago, really urged me on to talk about this narcissism. The history of it, what it does, to recognize it. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, one of the things, my mother was mentally ill, and when my stepfather, he was a police detective, and he wanted to save her, and fix her. So he started researching, and he started looking into her behaviors and her actions and trying to put a diagnosis on it, because she wouldn't go for help. And she was like that. She would pick a fight, and then she would she was never wrong. And there were other issues with her. She wasn't, I don't know, narcissistic or not, but she was different. But the reason I bring it up is because we all do that, right? We have a person that we know and love, or maybe we love to hate, and we try to fix them or understand it. And we go day by day. Maybe they're our relative, and so we think we have to put up with them. And in some cases we do. I had a client who, it was her sister, and her sister was constantly causing this drama in her life, and she was able to come to a point where she was open to realizing the pain that was happening to her. And so that's wonderful. I think a series of videos like that would really
Oh,
help a lot of people.
of course.
It's because when you're in it, you're so close that you can't realize, maybe what's happening. So one of the things in my book is to define boundaries,
Oh,
and
yes.
understand
Very important.
who gives you support and who does not.
Hmm.
And it's there's simple things that you know people can do to really make a
Right.
change for themselves, and
Yes. We
knowing
had mental illness in
knowing
my family, and it was totally different. Totally different from
yeah,
this
yeah,
particular situation. And we have to learn the difference. We really do.
yeah,
Was
and that's the thing where connecting with others, it's really important, to be able to go outside of your comfort zone, right?
yeah,
So
very
it's
much
like,
so.
yeah, care for yourself
Yeah.
and be open.
I
Again,
believe in
I know.
support groups. I absolutely believe in support groups. There are mental health support groups, there's grief, compassionate friends, parents of murdered children, AA, NA, OA, GA, all the A's. And they're important to people. If someone wants to see me, a bereaved parent, I encourage them to go to the compassionate friends first, because sometimes that's enough
Mm-hmm.
to be with people
Yeah.
who've gone through what they've gone through. It's very, very important. And I always get someone to meet them the first time that they go. And sometimes they don't need to see me. It's
Wow.
enough.
So I had someone who I had worked with in another arena, and she was at a loss. She had an autistic child, but her niece was killed by gun violence, and she and her sister were both, you know, at a loss where they couldn't function. They every day they thought about this incident that happened, and they just couldn't get over it, couldn't process it even. So is this is that what is that group?
The compassionate
Compassionate
friends,
Friends?
yeah, or
Is
the
that
parent or the families of murdered children. Either one of those would help.
okay? We'll
And
have to
they're
share those.
everywhere. They
We'll have to
started,
share those.
yeah, the compassionate friends started in England with a hospital um, chaplain talking with three women who had had stillborn babies, and there was
Mm,
nothing. And from that
mm,
conversation around the kitchen table with him and three women, Compassionate Friends was born. And it's in every country of the world. Everywhere.
wonderful.
Mhm.
Wow.
So
My
all I
my
have to do
mother.
is to look up, Google it, and you can find your local meetings.
Yeah, so that's interesting. My mother had a younger brother, and when the little boy baby, um, the parents were, and my mother was 10 at that time, and when they came home, it was about midnight. My grandmother accused my mother of murdering the baby,
Oh my.
and my but the baby had died, I guess, crib death is what they said.
Yeah.
Little Tommy was, I don't know how old he was. I have it in the records, but the fact that the mother was, my grandmother was blaming her daughter for this, and my poor mom, who was
Oh,
10 years old at the time, you know, it, it's something that carried through both of their lives
mhm.
all those years,
Oh,
and they
I'm
never
sure.
spoke of it. They Oh, it was just, so imagine if they had known of a support group like that could help. That's,
That's terrible. What a dreadful thing to live with, really.
yes,
And of course,
exactly.
grief and loss is much bigger. It's not
Mm,
just death. It's
hmm
enormous. People who are on their own after divorce, or people who have lost their jobs and can't get another job, that lose their home. I mean, this is enormous. When I used to teach graduate studies in grief, and I would ask them to brainstorm the word grief, and it was always death. And then I said, well, let's brainstorm loss. And it was enormous. I mean, even cancer patients losing their hair. That's loss. Hair, eyebrows. It's a vast, vast subject. I can talk about it for hours because it's so important.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was a career counselor for many years, and people would ask and express themselves in terms of what they're going through and their worries, their fears, and despite the fact they were making changes to improve themselves professionally by doing a resume or preparing for interviewing and things like that to support them, you know, even myself, there was one position that I had gotten let go from, and I had completed the work. I had done, in 3 months what people hadn't been able to do, and I never understood it, which later I learned that position was maybe only meant to be temporary, because my next position was far greater and I added more value. Even some of what I had done at that job was able to be used in the new one. So there's stepping stones, and what we go through, we may not understand it at the time, but losing something might open a door. It might give you something else, even if it's a skill or a trait to help someone else. That's something that I often, share with people, that if they want to take what they had gone through and just focus on the negative, they're not going to have a good life, a good experience, right? They can make a choice to use it to their advantage. And of course, it takes time. I mean, grief sometimes can dabble and dribble into everything, right? It's so
Of
encompassing, or
course.
it pops up when you least expect it, right? So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I
yeah.
say that with what I call care sharers. I said I was care sharer for 10 years for John. And I always say to people who are grieving, I was prepared for his death, but I was not prepared for life without him. And I
Mm,
never will be,
mm,
ever. And people need
mm.
to understand that. So there are good days, bad days. I also recommend that people get mentors if they're in trouble. I don't know if you can see this. This is my mentor.
Mm, mm.
I never met him,
Oh,
and his name is Dr. Viktor Frankl, and he wrote a little book called Man's Search for Meaning, and that book changed my life. And he said in this little book, people make conscious decisions on the way they feel, and I didn't know
yes.
that.
Oh,
And he wrote that in Auschwitz. He was a prisoner, first of all in Buchenwald, then in Auschwitz, and he could write something like that.
mm,
So I was very homesick when I first came here, dangerously homesick. And reading that little book under pressure, I didn't want to read it, absolutely changed my vision completely. He
mm,
sold millions and millions, and when out of 15 minutes I was able to talk with him on the phone, highlight
yeah.
of my life. And he was amazed at how
Mm,
that book was. And so the whole book, as I see it, is about choice. And the little story that I love is my favorite. He was in Auschwitz and he was laying railroad tracks, and it was bitterly cold, and he had no gloves and his shoes had holes in. And when you work with iron or steel in the cold, your skin sticks to it.
mm,
And so he was just beside himself, and suddenly a little bird flew down, a little brown bird, landed on the track,
Mm.
looked up with her big brown eyes, and he chose to believe that was the soul and spirit of his wife. He could have said that's just a bird, but he didn't. And that little story taught me about choice. So to get back to your book about emotions, it's a choice how you feel when you get up in the morning, and you can change it or not change it that day. So it's very important. I carry that little book around with me. It's falling apart. I got it in 1968. And whenever I got upset, because I'm very passionate about things I believe in, and I get very upset about something, and John would say, just say to me, go get the book. That's all he'd say, go get the book.
Nice.
It's not an easy book to read. It was written in a concentration camp, but it's not the usual concentration camp book. Don't get into it. Got a little bit at the beginning, but the whole idea of the spiritual path he was on in those environments was just astonishing. And when I talk to the recovering community, I talk about him a lot. Sponsors, mentors. It's important to get someone, if possible, that you can really, really trust. Few and far between, but you can find one, and it's important to do so.
That's a wonderful story, because some people they have relationships, whether they're fake relationships or real deep relationships, they may not want to open up to others. And to hear that you had your mentor, someone whom you've never met, but it was on the basis of a book and something that they could impart to you through your own experiences. When I was in 7th grade, I read Diary of Anne Frank. And
yes.
I read it in one day, and I skipped school to read it because I started in the morning, and I said, this is too important. I'm not going to go to school. I'm just going to. So I went to the library instead of school. And first time I ever did anything like that. And I skipped school. And when I confronted my mom that day, I couldn't bear the guilt of lying to her. So I told her the truth. I didn't go to school today. And she was, oh my God, what happened to you? Where were you all day? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I went to the library. And she was like, of course, angry and upset with me. And I had a consequence. But, long story short, I was more wanting her to reassure me about that situation and experience, because I had never heard of Hitler and of all that. I never, can you imagine here? How old was I? 11. So, but
yeah, yes, I understand.
But it's interesting because the impacts that we have, and I guess some of us are more spiritual than others, right? So things hit us harder. We're empaths or whatever it is, right?
Sure.
But for other people who have gone through things, like I know a few people in recovery right now. I know people who are dealing with divorce. I know people who are out of work, people who are dealing with illnesses. I mean, it's such an interesting world, and to be, alive right now, to me, it's a gift. And if we can help one another, I think that we'll be able to survive what this world is going through right now.
Yes.
At the start of this interview, you were mentioning, history repeating itself, and Ukraine and Russia and what's going on there. And, I know people who have family members there and who are, just, beside themselves.
I wear a bracelet. I wear their bracelet.
Oh, wonderful.
With a sunflower on it.
Yeah. We, and just to see ways that we can help others. And I think if people can find that thing that can ground them, and get them through, it's just a wonderful thing, Yvonne. So many wonderful things. So Yvonne, how can people find you? You have a website?
Yeah, the best, it's very simple. It's my name, YvonneKayeWisdom.com. It has all my podcasts on it. It has my phone numbers, my emails, everything, Facebook, everything, stories about me. And it's interesting because it's not that hard to help people, is it? Little things like, for example, a simple thank you. People don't understand. For example, all through COVID, when the people were working in the supermarkets, I would always say to them, thank you for being here. You have such courage. How hard is it? It's so simple. For someone, if they open the door, thank you. People don't understand. They think they're going to this big, big situation. Simple. Thank you for your service.
And our own reactions are something to be mindful of. In raising children, it's something I think that parents don't realize. And I guess if you have parents, grandparents, if you have aunts, sisters, brothers to help you, if you have that support, it's a little easier because then they get raised collectively and they have different inputs and different viewpoints and different things. In my situation, I don't have any of that, so it's like it's up to us to raise them. And there was a man who cut me off in driving, right? He cut in front of me, and he beeped at me because he thought I was yielding too long and I didn't proceed quick enough, but I wasn't going to go into the traffic. So my son, who is going to be 15, he's thinking, and I'm always kind of giving him little tips when I'm driving. And he says, Mom, don't let that guy cut you off, and his response was like, that of that fighting mentality, like he says, you were ahead of him, you should go. And I said, no, honey, I'm taking safety as my choice. If he's in a hurry, who knows what his situation is, but maybe he's late for work. And, it was like I kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt instead of getting angry and, just knowing that people are going through different things. And so it's true. Every little bit of kindness we can impart on others is very, very important. You may say thank you to that person and it might lift their spirits to then help someone else or go take that into the world, into their day. And it causes a chain reaction. I believe that.
It's so simple. People make such a big deal out of this, and it's just common courtesy, really, in a lot of ways. And then if I ever see anyone that's got a cap on with Vietnam veteran or Korea or Afghanistan, I always thank them for their service. Yeah, and they look at me in surprise. Some of them. I say to them, don't people say that to you? No.
When I do it, because I do it too, they are really appreciative of it. It means something to them to know that we have some sort of an idea that they gave up something of themselves for us in our freedoms. Right. It's so true. It's like, and having a son, I think, okay, if he were called to war, of course that has done something to me too, right? Because it's you see it in a different way. Your perception changes, right? So again, those things that we go through. So Yvonne, I loved our conversation. We have talked about so many things, and is there anything else that you feel you want to share with our listeners in regard to resiliency or?
Yeah, only to look at what's available if you are worried, upset about something. And oftentimes people say, well, I don't want to call you, I don't want to bother you. You can always pay it back later. When I was going through a disaster, when John was diagnosed and all these things happened, I took whatever I could. And now I pay it back. It's the same with AA. All those years I've been in the program, I'm only there to pay it back now for people that help me so much. So take care of yourselves. That's very, very important. And if there's anything that's bothering you, look to how you can alleviate that situation, because otherwise it becomes toxic. And if you have a lot of toxic people in your life, call me. because you have to get rid of them. I don't have many toxic people in my life anymore, but then I'm much older than most of you. And I find that people don't take advantage of this marvelous thing called friendship. See, I think friendship is the basis of love, a real friendship. And a friendship is a mutual thing. They're there for one another. And I'm blessed that I have several of those in my life. So it's very, very important. And you have the right to be here. I say to people, you have the right to be here. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill, because that's what we do. We take a small issue and make it enormous rather than look at the core. Be honest with yourself. So important. And have another life. Have fun. Laughter, music, dancing, whatever. Just have fun.
That sounds wonderful, doesn't it, people? We want to have pleasure in our life. We want to have fun. I mean, life is hard enough as it is, right? So let's, if you have goals or dreams, you can get there. You have to just listen to Yvonne. If you're worried or upset, call, take advantage of what's out there. You can always pay it back later.
Sure.
If you have toxic people in your life, that's a little more tricky. But, I had to remove someone from my life who was toxic, and it was a relative. And it took about eight tries, 8 tries of bouncing back, saying, oh, it'll be fine. I'm okay. I can deal with this. I can put up with their behavior or my feelings that are coming after our conversations. I can, but eventually I became strong enough to understand that it was really affecting me in a negative way.
Yeah.
And whatever love or stigma or idea that I was supposed to have that person in my life because they were a blood relation, it didn't override the negativity that I had in my life. And when I finally gave it up, and I believe in God, and so I went to church, and the message of that church that day was, there are storms in our life, and they're there for a reason, and we're supposed to come out the other end stronger, and we can. And that was a direct relation to what had been happening. Those conversations with this person, it was a storm, and it was just, it stayed over my head for years. Well, without getting into much more detail than that, when that was lifted and I was true to myself, so many paths opened, so many doors opened. I became happier in my other relationships with people. And, it was just a wonder. If anybody is interested in learning from this, let me know. I'm glad to talk with you one-on-one.
Yes, me too. Good. So, where are you located? Where are you?
So I am located physically in New Jersey, over not far from Bucks County, I think, right? Are you in Bucks County, PA?
No, I'm in Montgomery County.
Montgomery. Okay. So that's a bit further. I was out in Montgomery County for baseball over the summer.
Oh.
So, yes.
Well, I'm what you call soccer and I call football. I'm a football nut.
Okay.
Huge fan, and because England just beat Germany, so the women are so happy. And also a Harry Potter fan. Huge Harry Potter.
Yes.
Big time. Yeah.
Yes. We just recirculated. We watched 2 of the episodes, so we're going to rewatch them again as a family activity. Yes. So but
I have a whole shelf of Harry Potter books and CDs and all kinds of things.
Wonderful.
That's fun for me.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for inviting me. It's delightful to speak with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Yvonne. And when you have your, those series of videos on narcissistic behaviors,
yes.
Let me know. And, we're glad to have you again on the show. Again, folks, if you're listening, you can reach out, YvonneKWisdom.com. She is available. She counsels people with PTSD, with grief, alcohol, addiction, grief, and so many wonderful things, Yvonne. I really can't commend you enough for everything you're doing in the world. Thank you so much.
You're so kind. Thank you very much.
Thank you.